What's up, guys? So, a little randomly, Colby Covington has officially retired from MMA. I guess there just wasn't anything left for him that really excited him, and of course he has the whole thing at RAF. There were talks of him potentially fighting Bo Nickel, but that fight never really made sense as they're two different weight classes and wouldn't really get either of them anywhere. In this video, I wanted to look back on the career of Colby Covington because I feel like a lot of fans don't appreciate him for how good he used to be. I would compare his style to someone like Merab, just with a lot more versatility on the feet and better grappling. I do believe prime for prime, Colby's grappling is a lot more effective than Merab's just because of his ability to control. Merab has that same pressure cardio style but never really holds anyone down. When Colby took guys down, he would either take a traditional position like full guard, half guard, or side control, or he would settle for a body lock and ride someone and tire them out against the fence. He had a lot of crafty takedowns and single leg finishes. He also liked to utilize trips against the cage. So yeah, as far as his wrestling goes, it was pretty good. He never had a submission heavy style, but instead opted to tire out opponents similar to grapplers like Kamaru Usman or Khabib. On the feet, Colby was a heavy pressure fighter and utilized switch stance combinations as well as a wide range of kicks to back his opponent up to the fence. Now though, let's go through the highlights of his career and see how good he really was. When Colby first got into the UFC, he was undefeated and picked up 3 wins in a row, one being against another undefeated fighter. The guy was only 2-0 though. After this, his win streak would come to an end when he fought Worley Alves and got finished with a guillotine in the first round. The fight started out pretty normal as Colby was doing his normal wrestling work before Alves framed on his neck and quickly snatched the guillotine before jumping to full guard. Colby postured and slammed Alves down to the mat, but it just made things worse. Colby would go on to blame this loss on an injury, but I think this loss only made him better. After this, Colby would win 7 fights in a row. The most notable wins in this being RDA and Robbie Lawler. I don't believe this was a prime RDA though, and it definitely wasn't a prime Lawler. Regardless, Colby dominated them both and captured the interim welterweight strap. After defending it against Lawler, he would finally get his title fight against Kamaru Usman at UFC 245. This would be the first fight that Kamaru Usman has ever faced any adversity and go down as one of the best fights in UFC history. The two would strike for the entire fight, even though the best part of both of their games is their grappling. I guess the grappling just cancelled out, but they also just chose not to shoot at all. It was a grudge match, so they both seemed to make a mental agreement to only strike. Colby even got his jaw broken at the end of round 3 and still continued to come forward and land big strikes until he got finished at the very end of the last round. Kamaru found Colby's chin and ended it with a TKO. Colby would bounce back with a win against Woodley, and this would spark the narrative that if Usman never existed, Colby would be the dominant champion at welterweight. Many people also say that losing to Kamaru is the best thing Colby's ever done in his career. And I will say his wins don't hold up in the test of time, but Colby was never that active of a fighter. He's basically only fought 1 or 2 times a year throughout his entire UFC career and never really defended his ranking. Once he got the Usman rematch, he did perform a little better. This fight was also pretty undeserved and was only given to him because there wasn't really anyone else for Kamaru. Colby's trash-talking personality also played a part in getting him all these undeserved title shots, as the same thing happens later in his career. In this fight, he got dropped badly twice in the second round and would go on to arguably win the next 3 rounds of the fight. He lost a unanimous decision and would make a fairly quick turnaround when he fought Jorge Masvidal just 5 months later. Of course, these two used to be good friends, and the UFC really only made this fight since they knew it would have a good build-up and also get Colby's stock back up. Colby dominated pretty much every round of their fight. He did get dropped in the 4th, but recovered quickly and got back to putting on a pressure wrestling clinic on Masvidal. This fight pretty much stamped that Colby was the rightful #1 contender and could still dominate other high-level fighters. Masvidal would also go on to allegedly assault Colby for this fight, showing just how real the beef was. Definitely more real than Hamza vs Strickland in my opinion. Colby would then take about 1.5 years off from fighting and then get a completely undeserved title shot against Leon Edwards. Leon was coming off of the trilogy fight against Usman, and I think the UFC made this fight to see how good Leon was and how good Colby still was. Also, every fight that Colby's a part of that has a press conference will always sell. Leon would go on to dominate Colby in every aspect of their game, even taking Colby down just to prove he could. The only real success Colby had was some control time in the final round. Colby looked terrible in this fight and for whatever reason didn't put on his usual pressure and decided to point fight with probably the best point fighter in the whole division. After a whole year off, Colby would step in to fight Joaquin Buckley after Ian Gary had to pull out from their original main event in Tampa. Colby had some moments in this fight, but was largely losing, and after a cut above his eye got worse, the fight had to be stopped. So now that you know about Colby's career, was he ever elite? A lot of people nowadays kind of write him off as a bum, but I can't agree with that. It's easy to look at his resume on paper and write him off, but he really used to be an elite level fighter. It's a shame that Colby stayed so inactive in his career, and I would point to that as one of the reasons why his resume looks so bad on paper. We've got to remember Colby was gunning for a title shot, and at the time the champion was Woodley, who Colby would go on to defeat right after he lost to Kamaru. If Colby was able to get the title fight before UFC 235, he would have 100% been a welterweight champion. Him not having done this slightly diminishes his career and makes him look more like a journeyman whose best feat is losing to Usman, rather than a former champion who actively beat contenders to get back in the title picture. He's looked at as kind of a joke because of his pre-fight antics, but people forget, man, Colby was a very high-level fighter in his prime. There are a lot of guys today that I believe a prime Colby could beat, and we just saw how effective the style can be when Merab was champion. The style of constant pressure can really wear on guys who love keeping fights clean and technical. I fully believe if a prime Leon fought prime Colby, then Colby would win. It sounds crazy, but if you really think about it, Leon was never this takedown defense god, and he really just fought a pretty washed and discouraged version of Colby. Leon has shown to be pretty good at getting up, yes, but it wouldn't be a problem when we're dealing with someone like Colby's style. If Leon were to get up, then fine. Colby's just going to take him down again in a few seconds. Prime Colby versus Bilal would probably be a close striking match, just like the Usman fight, and I'd give a slight edge to Colby. Now, I'm not saying that Colby would beat everyone today in his prime. I think guys like Shafkat or maybe even Prates or JDM can beat a prime Colby, but we can't act like he wasn't incredibly talented and truly the second best fighter at welterweight when he was in his prime. He just ran into an all-time great in Usman. Something crazy to think about is how when Colby fought Usman the first time, before the TKO, the scorecards were ridiculously close. One judge had it for Usman, another had it for Colby, and another had it 2-2. That's pretty much as close as you can get in scorecards. People did complain that the stoppage was early, but it looks like Usman would have won anyway by a split or unanimous decision. I think there were even more media outlets scoring the fight for Colby rather than Usman. Sure, he's had a worse career ending than most, but I still think in his prime he could beat a lot of welterweights today. Even in his last fight against Buckley, he did decent for being so old and taking the fight on short notice. He was able to get Buckley down and control him for almost 4 minutes. That's another fight that I feel Colby definitely could have taken in his prime, especially with how bad Buckley's grappling has looked as of late. If it weren't for his antics, I think his career would be more appreciated. While I do think that his antics has gained him more fans and haters, whenever I see someone trash his career, they always go all out. Making that switch up from being his normal self to becoming that toxic trash talk personality that we all know today has honestly done him well. I find myself laughing a lot at the insults he makes because he's always so creative with the nicknames. My favorites would probably be Joanna No Paycheck or Dustin Poirier. All in all, I think the career of Colby Covington is one that he can sit back and be proud of. He's definitely had some bad moments in and out of fights, but overall he was able to capture the interim belt and have a ton of dominant wins over contenders. Even at the end of his career, he showed that he's not going to let these new guys run him over and that he'd still fight like the belt was on the line. Him retiring surprised me, so I thought it would be fun to revisit his career in a video like this. So if you enjoyed, please subscribe for more content just like it, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.